Real quick question. I often start with a question in case you're new. Not always, but sometimes. You don't even know the answer or the question yet. Would you declare yourself to be an organized sport fan fanatic? Tanner does. He's changed his mind. All right, so think through that for a bit. I mean, we had, the Olympics have been taking place. We had things like the Super Bowl. On a state level, there's wrestling, and wow, that's a lot of reasons to cheer and celebrate. Just here in this last week for that. There's for me growing up a little bit of background. I grew up in a small town community, Chambers, Nebraska here, and we offered football and basketball and track and volleyball. Yes, don't let me forget the women's sports. And to my knowledge, regarding organized sports, that was pretty much it. And so my background, because I went to a small school and I could participate in all of them, well, they needed me to participate, or else we would have not had enough maybe for a full team in some cases. But the reality is, I can tell you a lot about those sports, the rules that go along with some of those sports, the different strategies to achieving victory in some of those sports. I can also tell you how not to do things, because there were some not victories taking place there. And so there's some things that I learned even from an early age that, man, these are sports that I identify with. So when someone says, hey, did you watch the game? I ask which game, if it's one of those sports. Although track and field, when you're watching the Winter Olympics, there's not much there for me. I have to really study, I am somewhat fascinated by curling. Yeah. And it takes, I don't know the skill level. It's not like one of those things that I think would be like a huge sweat exertion type of thing. But as you watch those guys scrubbing, it's like your heart rate can get up, I think. And I don't know the rules about it. I understand you throw these blocks of granite down the ice and you're supposed to get it to the center. Like a shuffleboard, yeah. Yeah, you shovel it. Shuffle. I'm shoveling it right down the ice. It kind of reminds me of hockey on steroids, right? Can you imagine a puck that size getting thrown around the ice rink? It's shoot. All right, so I'm a little off track here, but all of these things like soccer or cricket or hockey and others you're probably coming to your mind, I'm not very familiar with, and it takes me quite a bit of effort to try to understand. Now, I worked with a guy who grew up with soccer, and he loves soccer. And to his frustration, I actually twice picked the winner of the FIFA Cup in our office pool bracket. I had no clue what I was doing, just circling names. Oh yeah, their little logo looks cool. And I didn't know what was going on. One summer in Dallas, the Dallas Stars, I think is the name of the hockey team, they won the Stanley Cup. The whole town went nuts. There was parties. I didn't know what was going on. What exactly is icing? I know if I hit a guy hard enough, I end up off the field in a penalty box, and the teammates have to play without me for a while. And so there's very little that I know about some sports, and others I know a little bit more about. Now, the reason why I tell you all of this is if you can imagine, I bet you can now, that you have grown up with something. You have experienced something your entire life. It doesn't take you much effort to think through how to make something happen. You know the rules of engagement, whether it's a conversation or whether you're trying to sort cattle. You know the rules of engagement there. And if you don't know the rules of engagement, you get run over. That's just how it works. But there are things that we know from our youth that's just ingrained in us. And there's other things that we come to a deeper understanding or appreciation of later on in life, but it's still different. I mean, they can become passions, and at some point in time it transitions from this, I kind of am dabbling in it, it's a hobby, to full on, I'm in it and I know everything I can about it. There's definite differences here. Now, let's apply these scenarios to our text today. If you're with us online, you can turn to Hebrews. If you're here in person, Hebrews is the book that we're going to be studying. Hebrews, the end of chapter 4, and then we'll move into chapter 5. But the book of Hebrews is written to Jewish Christians, individuals who our writer has been appealing to. He's spoken of the things that they have known from their youth, things that they were taught from the time their first memory. And in a brief way, he has tried already to touch and connect with them based upon the rules that they have learned and known their entire life, the Jewish faith. He's recalled to them some very specific people, the prophets, the angels, heroes that they would have looked up to, that they would have known in their past, in their upbringing, and the teachings. He's even recalled some of the different positions that are present within the Jewish faith, and he's going to do that even more so today. And so while the book of Hebrews is written for them, first audience, it's also written to us. And yet it's more difficult for us to understand all the fullness of it unless we have a deeper understanding of the Jewish faith. The Old Testament laws and covenants, the stories that took place, the accounts that took place. And so kind of like, I know this illustration breaks down, but it's almost like we as Gentiles were struggling a little bit to understand and connect all of the dots and the significance that the scriptures are trying to teach us in Hebrews, is because, well, they grew up learning soccer and we grew up learning football. And sometimes you call them the same thing, but they are different. They're really different. And yet at the same time, there are some nuances to it, and especially with the scriptures, the New Testament scriptures builds upon the foundation in the Old Testament. The Old Testament is a foreshadowing of the things that we see happening in the New Testament. It's extremely significant, but if we're not aware of it, we don't understand everything that's taking place, there's some things that we're just like, I don't get it. It's kind of like curling. Why did they hit that thing that far? What's the purpose? In the Jewish faith, they would see the dots connect, and they would just be like, I know what they're doing. I know what God's doing. I know what he's up to. I know when it comes to Jesus Christ as the fulfillment, which he's going to speak of, things would have been clicking for them, the connections for them very clearly. And so Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14 and following is actually going to talk about Christ being the ultimate fulfillment of the Old Testament role and person of that of high priest. High priest, and it's important. It's an important connection for the people, and if we can gain an understanding, it'll be important also for us. Now, in the previous section here, prior to this reading of the text, the author was reminding the readers not to ignore the warning that was contained in God's word concerning disobedience and another word, disbelief. And no, don't diss those words because they're very important words. They start with the word but disobedience, disbelief. And it was because of their sin of disbelief that Moses' generation were not able to enter rest in the promised land. If you were here last week, you are capturing that, remembering that. If not, you'll have to go back and catch up. So he uses an example there. It was something significant that they were even in danger of experiencing, and it had significant implications for their lives, eternal implications for their lives. And the suggestion was that they were going to suffer the same fate if they didn't believe, if they didn't hold on to their faith. They wouldn't be able to experience the promised land, the true rest, which he spoke of being that of in the presence of God and Christ in heaven. So that's our setup. He follows then in verse 14 with these words. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. Important passages of Scripture here. Last week we mentioned there's a passage of Scripture, the sword, the Word of God is a sword, and it's a very popular, well-known verse. These verses here have kind of a same or similar caliber. Let us hold fast to our confession. Let us with confidence draw near the throne. These are things that you're going to hear over and over today. So hold on to it. Write it down, circle it, take it home with you. Now, to understand the richness and fullness of this section of Scripture, it's helpful for us to understand and know what the role and person of high priest did and who they are. And I'm not going to be able to go extremely deep with the time that we have here today, but for many of us, when we think about the word priest, there's something that automatically, likely, pops into our minds. Depending upon your background religiously, you might even see some of the parallels to the position of the priest that the writer was even referencing there in Hebrews. However, even the Jews of today, I believe, might struggle to fully know all the depth and the richness of the parallels that this first century audience would have automatically connected with. And so let's just admit that there's a little bit of a loss in the full appreciation of this text based upon just a limited understanding of the fullness of that position and that person. Now, the Jews of that day, unlike today, or even us today, they would not have missed it. In an attempt to explain it, so we're all caught up on this connection, I want to look at this role, the high priest. He's a man of prominence. He had a very special, like all the priests, he had a very special wardrobe, significant wardrobe. I mean, it was the wardrobe of wardrobes. And the position that he held was that of the highest in the land, because it was deemed as he was deemed as the most spiritual man. He was ultimately responsible for the care of the people. He was the one to ultimately offer the guidance based upon his relationship with God, based upon his understanding of the law of Moses and what God had spoken through generations and the prophets before. He is the one who goes before God on the people's behalf to ask for mercy where there have been failings and shortcomings. Seems like a fairly important guy. And I don't know about you, but I think that the pressure of that would have been significant. Sometimes I'm not even sure that I can care for a whole lot of people, let alone an entire nation, a whole people of God. And to know that every word is being weighed and every word spoken is being received as, without question, gospel truth. And I use that word gospel truth significantly. So as the high priest, he would have had, I think, an immense amount of responsibility. There also would have been an immense temptation to abuse the power, to hold a strong hand, to be seen as, hey, you all need me, whether you like it or not. Short of bowing down to me in worship, we'll just say that I'm standing before God and God's behind me, but bow down. I mean, there would have been, I think, a temptation there to be just He was the guy who stood before God and communicated all that God had spoken. It would have been easy to say, you know what, these people, I'm really tired of these people. If they just, oh wait, all I got to do is say God told them to do this. You can say tell them to. He might have had a little bit of an English problem. But the power that was there, the responsibility that was there. And I think as we look at this, the amount of purity required, it would be daunting to think through. Now, a humble high priest, I would think, would be looking at this role and his responsibility, standing before the Lord his God, could have just sent him to a state of complete and utter fear. What if I'm not pure enough when I enter into the most holy place? What if the sacrifice was not actually spotless? What if I missed something? What if I don't do the steps I do some of these steps every day. It's repetitive. I just go through the motions. What if my heart's not right in it? What if I forget this thing that I only do once a year? What if I forget that? I do it wrong. Well, what if God rejects the sacrifice? What if he rejects me? Well, we know that they could die, which is why they tied bells around their wardrobe and tied a rope around their waist as they went into the Holy of Holies, because if they were still moving, well, the bells would still signal. And if the bells stopped, it meant that God did not receive the sacrifice, that he was displeased with the high priest, which I would think would probably be, the bells would be this loud, not like crash, and then silence. And the rope was there to pull the guy out because nobody could go in and get him. It was a sacred spot. One author wrote this to kind of help set the scene. And it's somewhat picturesque as you close your eyes maybe and picture the scene. It says, as the first rays of the morning sun break across the Mount of Olives, a priest standing on the pinnacle of the temple sounds the trumpet. This is the signal that the morning sacrifices are about to begin. A total of 15 animals are sacrificed on the massive altar that stands before the temple. And in the presence of thousands of witnesses, the high priest slaughters these animals with the ceremonial knife. The court runs red with the blood of the slain animals. A portion of the blood is poured into a cup. At the appointed time, the high priest takes the cup and enters into the temple. Passing through the outer doors, he finds himself in the holy place. To his left is a golden lampstand, casting its soft light through the room. To his right stands the table of showbread. Before him stands the altar of incense, its coals still warm from the morning offerings. Beyond the altar of incense is the great double veil. Normally, no man is permitted to pass beyond this veil, but on this day, the high priest passes through the veil to enter into the Holy of Holies. Dominating this room is a single piece of furniture. We actually talked about it this morning in Connect. That's not in the article. They didn't know we had Connect. Dominating this room is a single piece of furniture. It is the Ark of the Covenant. It is a wooden chest overlaid with gold. It has a lid of pure gold. This lid is known as the mercy seat. On each end of the mercy seat is the golden figure of an angel bowed inward and facing the center of the mercy seat. This mercy seat represents the throne of God. Here in the dim light of the Holy of Holies, the sound of the bells and the tug of the rope he is tied to the waist, should anything go wrong, are real reminders of the significance of the place he is in. The high priest sprinkles the blood onto the mercy seat, and in doing so, he is providing an atonement for the sins of the people. Now I want to read these verses, if we go back to 4, verse 14 and 16. I'm going to continue on into chapter 5. It says, since then, we have a great high priest whose name is Jesus. That's added in there. Who has passed through the heavens, not just some veil, passed through the heavens. Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold fast our confession. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses, but one who in every respect has been tempted as we are, yet without sin. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. You hear those words that would have connected in the Old Testament. In chapter 5, verse 1 says, for every high priest chosen from among men is appointed to act on behalf of men in relation to God, to offer gifts and sacrifices for sins. He can deal gently with the ignorant and wayward, since he himself is beset with weakness. Because of this, he is obligated to offer sacrifice for his own sins, just as he does for those of the people. And no one takes this honor for himself, but only when called by God, just as Aaron was. Now, in these verses, again, we see a little bit more of the details of the high priest and what they did. Since the time of Aaron, this role and this process has been taking place. And for an Israelite, this would have been first nature or second nature information for them, hopefully. And the high priest was key to their rest. The high priest was key to their forgiveness. The high priest was key to them receiving mercy. And if the high priest didn't offer the sacrifices, no forgiveness, no mercy. And yet, in the Old Covenant, in the Old Testament, we see that this high priest was a man. He was the one who had to make this appeal before God for the people and himself. Now, our writer here declares that Jesus is our high priest. Jesus is the one who goes before God on our behalf. He is the one who offers the sacrifice, and later we'll understand that he is also the sacrifice. But here in this text, he declares that it's because of Jesus standing before God our Father on our behalf that we receive forgiveness, that we receive mercy. Since then, we have a great high priest who has passed through the heavens, Jesus, the Son of God. Let us hold fast our confession. This was what he wanted to remind the people of, that Jesus is our high priest. And because you have this faith and this understanding, according to the Old Testament law, that God has offered mercy and forgiveness, but they've offered it through the high priest, a man, recognize and remember that Jesus Christ is the ultimate high priest. He stands before God. He is the one who is offering mercy and forgiveness. This is your confession. No matter what happens, don't stray away from it. And remember that your high priest, Jesus Christ, is not some arbitrary man who is some God who doesn't have any idea how to identify with you, because God, in the form of man, came in Jesus. He took on flesh. He lived and he breathed and he stubbed his toes, and I bet he got sandburrs too. And yet was without sin. There's a man right there. There's so many other temptations that you and I face. Jesus was victorious over every one of them, but he knew the temptations that we face. He was tempted and he was victorious. And it's because of that truth that we hold on to, that we can have confidence. Yeah, I've mentioned that our faith should not be one built on eggshells, and we should not be going around wondering whether or not we're saved or not. We should be able to know, because of our truth and our faith in Christ, we can have confidence to draw near to the throne of grace. But we can only draw near to the throne of grace and confidence if our faith is in Christ. If our faith is in anything else, now we have a reason to be afraid. Just like the high priest of the day who questioned whether or not they were enough, who questioned whether or not maybe the sacrifice was enough. I believe there was a great amount of holy respect and fear. And yet at the same time, I think that's good for us to understand who it is that we seek to draw near to. And yet still at the same time, have full confidence. Because God sent his son to not only be our sacrifice, but to offer the sacrifice. Jesus, as our high priest, has not passed through some tapestry made by men from generations come before. But he has entered into the presence of God in the heavens. Jesus is greater. Jesus is supreme to the high priest that they would have identified with. The Holy of Holies that Jesus is standing in is not the same dimly lit room behind some curtain, but in all the fullness of the glory and the brightness of our God. And Jesus, unlike the high priests who have come before him, possibly in fear, having to offer sacrifices even for their own sins, Jesus Christ is pure and spotless. Doesn't talk about him wearing any bells or any ropes. And while all the past priests may have maybe even jockeyed for the role or hoped that they would be chosen for the role, anointed, Jesus was appointed. And so we see in verse 5 of chapter 5, so also Christ did not exalt himself to be made a high priest, but was appointed by him who said to him, "You are my son, today I have begotten you." And again, a quote where God from the heavens speaks to Jesus Christ. As he says also in another place, "You are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek." In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears. Excuse me. To him who was able to save him from death. And he was heard because of his reverence. Although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the source of eternal salvation to all who obey him, being designated by God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. So many rich words there. That Christ was appointed, he was set apart differently, he was God's son. While on earth, he went before God on his people's behalf, even for our behalf. And God listened. He was and still is the perfect high priest. And yet, even in this passage of Scripture, there's some things that are still confusing, and especially confusing since we're trying to learn about it generations after the fact, and it's not something that's first nature to us. One of the concepts here is especially kind of hard, maybe even for the Jewish people of that day, is to grab a hold of, was the name Melchizedek. For some, I guess it'd be like this, when you drop the name of a famous person and the person you're talking to has no idea who you're talking about. You ever been in that situation? I was actually in one of that conversation this morning. I was like, I kind of remember. And it kind of loses its significance. I think some of the writings of Hebrews does that for us as Gentiles, especially thousands of years later. But Melchizedek is one of those names. We're like, who's he talking about? Why did he throw that in there? What's that all about anyway? And again, we don't have time to get into it, but it's that one of the names of the Bible that is so mysterious is this name. All we really know about him is that he was a king of Salem. After the battle against the 5 kings in Genesis chapter 14, we see Melchizedek stepped into the narrative, and then he vanishes again. His name is brought up again in Psalms 110, if I remember correctly. We know nothing of his ancestry, his family, or really his exploits. All we know that he was this ruler. The city would one day be called Jerusalem, where he ruled. And then he was called priest of God Most High in Genesis 14:18. And when Melchizedek met Abram after his victory, the king came with bread and wine in his hands and a blessing on his lips. And then centuries later, after the coming of Christ, the author of Hebrews looked at the account of Melchizedek and drew a number of analogies, connections between him and the ultimate high priest, the King of Jerusalem, Jesus. And yet, again, all of these details and connections for the Jewish audience, I think they would have been so encouraged by it. So encouraged. And so when he says, hold fast, I think it would have sunk in. And when he declares to them, draw near in your time of need, it would have been a welcomed invitation. Would have been a welcomed invitation. And so I think for us today, we're trying to gain and glean some truths from this. What does this mean? What's the significance of this for us? I think he beckons them back to the day of their profession. So for us in this room, many of us have made the decision to follow Christ. We've stood before someone and confessed that Jesus Christ is Lord, that we believe that he is the Son of God. We have declared that we have repented of our sins, turned away from the life that we once lived to walk in the ways of God. We've been joined in the waters of baptism, rising a new creation to proclaim the goodness of God to others every day with words and our life. Do you remember that day? Do you remember the confession you made? Or is it something like maybe that dim lit room? It's just hard to remember. In your time of need, do you remember your confession, what you proclaimed, that no matter what took place, no matter what happened in your life, Christ was enough and would be enough? Do you remember that day? Hold fast to it, and may you be encouraged as you remember that day, because it's not some arbitrary day in history. It's the day in which Christ declared, "You are my child. Today I am your God." And no matter what you face, you don't face it alone. In your time of need, I am there. Do you remember the day? Are you struggling today? I think the writer of Hebrews is calling us to remember that day, to hold fast to that confession. And even if we've thought, man, I've messed up again and again and again and again and again and again. Because of Christ, there's still mercy and forgiveness. You can have confidence to go before your God with a repentant heart. Hold on to that truth. Receive mercy. Find grace. And if you've not made that decision to follow Christ, today, let it be that day where you can declare, this is the day I'm making God Lord and Savior. confessing him, believing in him. There's not going to be a day where I choose my own way, which you will struggle with that, as we all do, I think. But we have a high priest who is perfect and stands before our God on your behalf. And the truth that is being proclaimed here is just similar. I mean, it's similar to the same truth that the Israelites faced when they were told, hey, enter the promised land, receive your rest. And today you have a choice to believe or disbelieve, to enter his rest or not. Now, further application. Our red chairs in the room. Red chairs, whether you're sitting in one or not, there's nothing special about the seating or padding in them. There's no ejection seats in them. I don't have them wired for anything. They're there to serve as a reminder that as we walk this earth, there are people amongst us who have not yet declared Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, have not made that decision. If we put it in the context of Hebrews, there's still Jewish followers bound by the Old Testament law and sacrifices. Bound to a man who is priest who can't actually offer the sacrifices without offering his own first. It falls short. There's people around us who have placed their faith in their own self and their own ability to gain wealth. They don't need God. There are people amongst us who have placed their faith in other religions. I'll call them that. In other things and other spiritual things. In things that will never lead to eternal rest because they're not founded in Jesus Christ. There are people amongst us that's the reality. And so today, as you think and you pray, not only for yourself, pray for that person who, when you think about it, the confidence to draw near to the most holy God is nothing but a fearful experience. I don't want that for anyone. And I know you probably don't want that for anyone, but apart from Christ, standing before a holy God without Christ as our high priest is a fearful thing. It's just the reality. And so this week, I want you pray really hard and think of your own confession. Think of the times when you think about need, people who are in need, and tell them about the one who can give them confidence in their time of need, who can offer mercy and grace in their time of need. It's not going to remove the situation, but can definitely give us a different perspective. I want you to think about, maybe start some conversations where you talk to this person about a time that someone went to bat for you. Maybe you had a brother who said, I'll take the punishment, or a sister who said, you knocked over the vase that mom so deeply cherished, but I'll take the blame. Or at least I'll talk to him. Maybe you've had experiences, family gatherings where I know he or she, they're just a little over the top. I'll talk to them. They went to bat for you. Maybe you've experienced that. Maybe you've done that. Talk about it. Help connect the dots in life. And then connect it to Christ. Think about the things that, ask them what they're familiar with. Ask them about their background. The things that are first nature. Maybe it's a sporting thing. Were you in sports? You know all the rules? Do you remember all the rules? Start the conversation. Pray for God to move and work and open the doors. So that they might know mercy and rest. I'm going to invite you to stand, and I want to pray for us and pray for those around us. But whatever the step is, maybe you're here today and you've never made that decision. Maybe you've said, I believe, but never confessed it out loud to someone. or maybe you've done those things, but never really repented and said, I'm done with this old way of life. I'm changing directions completely. Or maybe baptism isn't part of the story where we put to death the old way of life in the water. Washed, rise to a new career. Whatever your step is today, we invite you to come and share that step. And maybe that it's a step towards the doors to enter into a conversation with someone so that they might know of the great high priest. But I encourage you to take the step God calls you to today. Let's pray. Father, as we take steps this week, help us to take steps that reflect mercy and grace, obedience rather than disobedience. May you guide our words. Help us to take hold of the promise that you will give us the words to speak when we need them. Make us more aware of these truths, and while sometimes it might be hard to connect what it means to have you as our great high priest, Lord, just grant us the joy of understanding it in a deeper way. We know that we're not going to go to bat necessarily for someone before you. Jesus is already fulfilling that role. But you do call us to make people aware so that they can even step up to the plate. And so help us to connect dots. For each of us in this room, if there's things that we're struggling with, Father, just lead us to that point of communicating them, not only to you, but maybe to another brother and sister in Christ, so that we might receive accountability, that we might be encouraged. Call to our memories our confession, our faith. Call to our memories what you have done, so that we can come with confidence and joy before you. Father, thank you for this time that you've given us to equip us and to teach us, to share our lives with one another and worship you. May you be glorified as a result of this time spent. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Have a great week, church.